Hello, mystics and ocean lovers. Today, we will embark on an endless journey where the waves not only carry the sounds of wind and water, but also the echoes of forgotten civilizations. The brilliant cities that once shone in their glory, Nahemara with its soft light, Iskara with its eternal fire, Deyvara with its soul mirrors, and Erythra with its crimson coral, now remain only in legends and dreams. Let us listen to the ancient story told in a mythical voice, where the sea is not only a home for waves and fish, but also a memory of time, a door that opens to secrets that never sleep. Are these sunken cities truly lost? Or are they just waiting to return? Beneath the endless veil of the sea, where the sun's light falters and silence holds dominion, there are places where the ruins of forgotten worlds sleep. No chart marks their place, no sailor dares claim them, yet whispers of their existence cling to the tides, carried as secrets from one generation of wanderers to the next. They are the drowned kingdoms, the marble avenues swallowed whole by time, the once proud spires now guarded by coral and shadow. It is said that when the world was young and men still listened to the deep, cities were raised not upon the land alone but in harmony with the waters. Walls of pearl and silver glistened beneath waves that were gentler then, and towers carved from stones now unseen touched both moonlight and abyss. Ships of crystal, guided by stars no longer mapped, slipped between archways sunken now in silence. From such a world begins the tale of Nahemara, a city beyond memory, born upon a shelf of ocean where the waters shimmered with hues unknown to mortals of this age. Its streets were paved with luminous stone that glowed faintly even in darkness, as though the ground itself remembered the light of the sun. In Nahemara, the people were artisans of the sea, binding shells into music, weaving nets not for fish but for dreams, and crafting lanterns whose flames were kindled by whispers of wind captured from the surface. The ocean itself was their ally. From the depths rose pillars of living coral that twined with the marble of their temples, breathing life into the stone. Schools of silver fish moved like flowing ornaments through the wide, open halls of their sanctuaries, and the people spoke of them not as creatures but as companions. They were a people who believed that water bore memory, that each wave carried within it the voice of ages past, and by listening one might learn the secrets of eternity, yet time is a patient thief. The waters that once embraced Nahemara grew restless. Storms gathered with an unfamiliar ferocity, and tremors beneath the seabed cracked the glowing streets. Legends tell of a night when the moon was swallowed in shadow, and the sea rose up in fury, pounding its own child into silence. When dawn returned, there was no city upon the shelf, only the mournful cries of gulls above a wide, unbroken sea. But the sea does not forget, and neither do the ruins it hides. Long centuries after Nahemara's vanishing, mariners spoke of strange shapes glimpsed through the glass-clear waters. Archways draped in kelp, statues eroded yet noble, and steps descending into infinite gloom. Some who claimed to have swum among those stones returned changed, speaking in voices not their own, their dreams haunted by songs of the deep. Others vanished entirely, leaving only their ships adrift, as though the city had claimed them back into its silent court. Far away from the drowned cradle of Nahemara, another tale rises like a shadow from the abyss. It is the tale of Iskara, the city of fire beneath the waves. While Nahemara was luminous and serene, Iskara was carved from black basalt and obsidian, forged where the sea itself met rivers of flame. The people there were keepers of hidden power, shaping glass from the molten heart of the earth, forging blades that shimmered like the horizon at dawn. Their towers rose jagged and angular, and within them burned ever-living fires, undimmed by the water's embrace. How these flames endured in that realm remains a mystery none can unravel, but those who lived there said the fire was not of this world, but of another, the breath of the stars themselves. Imprisoned in stone, Iskara's people were not gentle as those of Nahemara. Their voices carried the strength of thunder, and their gatherings echoed with chants that shook the water. They revered not the memory of waves, but the wrath of them, seeing in each storm a divine warning, and in each eruption of the seabed the judgment of unseen gods. Yet even the strongest stone is worn by the tide. The black towers of Iskara cracked, their unearthly flames sputtered and dimmed, and the sea, ever patient, dragged the city down into its boundless prison. Some say the Iskarans defied the ocean itself, cursing the waves as they were swallowed, vowing to one day return with fire greater than before. Mariners who hear whispers in caverns beneath the sea swear that the curses of Iskara still echo, their voices like embers drifting in the cold. And so the drowned kingdoms multiplied, each tale heavier than the last, each ruin a deeper wound upon the ocean's body. Some spoke of Deyvara, the city of mirrors, where every surface reflected not the beholder but what lay in their heart. Its ruins, it is said, rest in the still waters where no current stirs, where light bends strangely, and divers vanish in silence. Others recall Erythra, the crimson halls built from coral that bled color into the sea for miles. Even now, it is whispered, when the currents shift just right, the waters of that region run red, like the veins of a forgotten beast. To the people of the shore, these stories drifted as half-remembered myths, lullabies told to restless children, warnings spoken to those who dared the deep. But to the ocean herself, they were truths preserved, each city another verse in the endless hymn she sings beneath her waves. The sea keeps her secrets well, but every so often, the veil is lifted. A storm casts aside sand and silt, revealing a column of stone not seen for millennia. A tremor unseals a gate long closed, and for a fleeting hour the forgotten breathes once more. Those rare souls who stumble upon such revelations are forever changed, for they have walked not in this age, but in the echo of another. So it was with the crew of the Caledrian Star. Their vessel was small, a trader's craft, built of pine and tar, meant for journeys along the coastlines, not for voyages into the wide, uncertain blue. Yet greed or perhaps destiny carried them further, chasing whispers of hidden pearls and treasures richer than kings could bear. They sailed beyond known waters, their maps fading into blank parchment, until the sea itself seemed to resist their passage. For 7 days, the sky was without cloud, the water without wave, and the silence without mercy. On the 8th, a storm rose without warning, a wall of wind and thunder that shattered mast and hull alike. The Caledrian Star was broken upon the waves. Her crew flung into the furious dark, but when dawn came, not all were claimed. A handful awoke upon a shore unlike any known to them. The sand was pale as bone, the air heavy with the scent of salt and unseen flowers, and before them stretched ruins that should not have been. Arches taller than trees, columns leaning like weary sentinels, and stones carved with markings no man among them could decipher. They had found what others had only dreamed. One among them, a man named Seravon, rose to his feet and felt the trembling of the ground beneath him. He laid his hand upon a fallen pillar, its surface warm though the morning was cool. And in that instant he heard it, not with his ears, but with the marrow of his bones. A voice, deep and ancient, whispering through the stone. His companions called to him, but he did not answer. His gaze was fixed upon the waters beyond the ruins, where the sea rolled back from the shore, as though retreating. And there, in the receding tide, more of the city revealed itself, avenues stretching into the deep, statues standing proud though mantled in coral, and stairways descending into shadow. The others trembled, some in awe, others in terror. But Seravon only whispered a single word, though he did not know from whence it came, Nahemara. The sea had remembered. The ruins stretched farther than the eye could follow, each stone half veiled by the embrace of seaweed, each arch still carrying the nobility of forgotten ages. The survivors of the Caledrian star stood in silence, as though their breaths might disturb the slumber of gods. The waves hissed low against the marble, and from somewhere within the labyrinth of half-drowned streets came the sound of bells, though none among them moved, and no wind stirred the air. Seravon walked first, his steps deliberate, as if guided by a memory that was not his own. His companions followed, torn between the dread that gnawed their hearts and the strange reverence that weighed upon their limbs. They entered what had once been a grand avenue, its flagstones gleaming faintly despite centuries beneath the tide. Statues lined the way, figures whose faces had been smoothed by time but whose eyes still seemed to glimmer with unspoken command. As they passed beneath a shattered arch, a flock of silver fish burst forth, moving like a living banner through the water. The light broke upon their scales, casting fragments of brilliance upon the ruined walls. For an instant the avenue seemed whole again, as though time itself had recoiled, revealing Nahemara in her prime. The crew gasped, and one among them, a young sailor named Erythra, fell to his knees, whispering prayers to a god he had never named before. The further they walked, the stronger the presence grew. They felt it in their bones, a deep hum like the pulse of the world. Some clutched their chests, convinced their hearts had taken on a new rhythm, one not their own. The silence of the ruins was deceptive, the city was not still. It breathed, it remembered, it watched. At the heart of the avenue stood a temple, its roof shattered, its columns draped in kelp, yet still it bore an aura of majesty. Upon its threshold lay a stone basin, carved with runes that glowed faintly with a blue fire. The crew halted, but Seravon pressed forward, his hands trembling as he reached for the basin's edge. When his fingers touched the carvings, the glow surged, casting light into the shadows. From the depths of the basin rose water, though it overflowed not, and within its surface shimmered images that none could comprehend. Shapes of towers unbroken, of streets filled with life, of figures in robes who walked side by side with creatures of the sea. Voices filled the air, speaking in tongues no man alive should know, yet Seravon understood. The words carved themselves into his mind, old and terrible, the sea does not forget. The sea waits. A great tremor rippled beneath their feet. The ruins shuddered, sending clouds of silt spiraling upward. Statues toppled, columns cracked anew, and from the abyss beyond the temple stairs came a sound unlike any the crew had ever known, a chorus. Both mournful and commanding, like a choir of stones dragged across eternity, fear overcame them. Some fled back toward the shore, their cries swallowed by the rolling tide. But Seravon did not move. His eyes were fixed upon the basin, upon the visions that shifted within it. He saw not ruin, but a kingdom alive, a place where light and water moved as one, where voices of men and whales intertwined in songs that bent the very currents. He saw their crafts, ships not of wood but of crystal, moving beneath the waves as though they swam with the will of the ocean itself, and he saw their end. He saw the night when the moon darkened, when the waters rose higher than mountains, when voices cried in unison before silence claimed them. The memory was not his, yet he felt it as if it burned within his flesh. Then the vision stilled, and the basin was empty once more. The glow faded. Only silence remained. Seravon fell to his knees. His companions, trembling, dared not approach. They whispered of curses, of gods, of the folly of men who trespassed where they did not belong. Yet none dared lay hand upon Seravon, for in his gaze there burned something other, something that marked him no longer as wholly theirs. That night, as they sheltered among the ruins, the sea grew restless. From the black horizon rose a mist, heavy and luminous, cloaking the world in shifting silver. Through it came shapes, vast and indistinct, towers, bridges, avenues, drifting as though the city itself had risen again in ghostly reflection. The crew huddled close, but Seravon rose to his feet, walking toward the shore with arms outstretched. From the mist came voices, singing in a tongue older than stone. The water lapped higher, glowing faintly as though stirred by unseen hands. And then, for an instant, all of them saw it, the city of Nahemara whole, glistening with its eternal light, alive and proud beneath the waves. Figures moved along its streets, their faces hidden yet their eyes burning like stars. They beckoned, the vision faded with the dawn. When the sun rose, Seravon was gone. His footprints led into the sea, and no trace of him remained. Those who survived fled the island upon a raft of broken timbers, their minds shattered by what they had witnessed. They spoke of Seravon's disappearance in hushed tones, and some claimed to hear his voice still, calling from beneath the waves whenever the sea was calm. Others swore that on nights when the moon hid her face, the ruins gleamed faintly, as though the city stirred once more, and that within those ruins Seravon now walked, not as a man but as one of Nahemara's own, yet the tale did not end there. For word of their discovery spread, as such tales always do. Sailors whispered in taverns, merchants exchanged secrets for coin, and soon others sought the ruins, hungering for treasures they imagined must lie within. Few returned. Those who did carried eyes clouded with strange light, and their tongues stumbled with words no living language contained. In time, other cities revealed themselves, drawn forth by shifting tides and restless earth. Off coasts long abandoned, beneath gulfs uncharted, men found hints of worlds once proud. One told of a gate carved from jade that opened onto nothing but abyss. Another spoke of a bridge of gold, half buried in sand, leading into the open sea where no land had ever been. Always the sea hid more than it revealed, offering glimpses but never surrendering her secrets, and so the stories grew. The sea was no longer merely the domain of storms and hunger but of memory. Of civilizations older than the land itself. Men began to fear its silence more than its fury, for in silence they heard whispers, and in calm waters they saw reflections of things they could not understand. Among these whispers rose the name of Iskara once more. Sailors swore that in the blackest depths, where the ocean floor cracked with fire, voices thundered as though the people of the Fire City still lived, still cursed, still waited. Some who ventured near returned with burns upon their flesh though no flame had touched them, and their eyes burned with fever as they raved of towers of flame beneath the sea. Others spoke of Deyvara, the mirror city, glimpsed only when the sea was still as glass. They told of how a sailor, gazing upon its polished walls, saw not his reflection but a shadow self who smiled back with cruel intent. That sailor leapt into the water, vanishing, and when his companions dragged him forth, they swore it was not him but another who wore his face, and of Erythra, the coral city, the tales were darker still. Divers returned with hands stained red, their skin etched with patterns like living coral. They claimed voices called to them from beneath, begging them to bring blood to feed the city's heart. Some refused and wasted away, their bodies brittle as shells. Others obeyed, vanishing into the crimson tides with mad laughter upon their lips. All these stories, heavy as tides, drifted through the world, carried upon the breath of waves and the silence of drowned stones. And always the sea listened, patient and eternal, guarding her hidden children, for the sea does not forget. The sea waits. Long years passed, and the tales of the drowned kingdom spread like shadows across the world. They were told not merely by sailors and wanderers, but by priests in their dim-lit temples, by kings in council with their fearful scribes, by poets who claimed their verses were dreams sent by the sea herself. Some dismissed the stories as madness, but others listened, for within the cadence of those tales was a weight too ancient to be invention. In time, one man sought the truth with more fervor than all others. His name was Caelith, born of no noble house, son of no renowned bloodline, but touched by visions since his youth. When he gazed upon the sea, he saw not waves alone but towers glimmering faintly beneath the foam. In dreams he walked among avenues of stone, his feet wet with tides that whispered names he could never remember upon waking. He carried within him a hunger, a yearning for the forgotten. Caelith became a mariner, not for trade or conquest, but for pursuit of those whispers. He traveled across coasts and oceans, gathering fragments of rumor like pearls, piecing together a map that none but he believed could lead to the truth. His companions called him cursed, yet still they followed, drawn by his voice and the strange fire in his eyes. Their ship, the Deyvara, was a vessel of uncommon craft, its keel carved from wood said to resist the rot of centuries, its sails woven from cloth black as midnight. So that under moonlight it vanished into the horizon like a phantom. Caelith claimed the design came to him in dream, and that each night when the wind carried the scent of salt and memory, unseen hands guided his craft as though the ship itself longed for the places he sought. They sailed far from known waters, through storms that shattered lesser ships, through calms so still their oarsmen despaired, through seas where stars themselves seemed twisted, unfamiliar. At last they came upon a region where the water glowed faintly by its own accord, not with moonlight, nor with the fire of plankton, but with an older radiance, as though the sea's own blood carried memory. It was there, in that place, that the Deyvara anchored above a shadow vast as a continent. Caelith leaned over the rail, his eyes wide, and he whispered a name he did not know he knew, Iskara. The crew peered into the depths, and in the faint glow below they saw jagged towers rising like teeth. Their spires cracked but still aflame with an unnatural light. Rivers of molten fire ran between avenues, imprisoned within black stone yet never quenched by water. The city still burned, though the sea had claimed it. Suddenly, the water heaved as though recoiling from some deep tremor. The ship rocked, and from beneath rose bubbles vast as caverns, bursting with fumes that reeked of iron and ash. The crew cried out, some falling to their knees, for in that smoke they saw shapes, figures of flame and shadow, their arms raised in defiance, their eyes burning with eternal wrath. A voice thundered through the water, though no tongue shaped its sound, we do not kneel. The sea roared as if in answer, and a wall of black waves rose, casting the Deyvara high before hurling it down again. The crew fought for their lives, but Caelith only laughed, his arms wide, his voice calling out as though to an old friend. He shouted words none could understand, syllables that burned their ears like coals. The storm raged until dawn, and when at last the waters calmed, half the crew was gone, swept into the abyss. The survivors clung pale and trembling to the deck, whispering that they had looked into the eyes of gods and seen only fury. Yet Caelith stood tall, his gaze fixed upon the still smoldering towers beneath. His voice was hoarse, but he whispered with conviction. They endure. And they wait. From that day forward, Caelith's dreams grew heavier. He spoke less to his men, more to the sea, as if the waves themselves were his counsel. His eyes grew shadowed, his skin pale, yet the fire within him blazed brighter than ever. He led the Deyvara further still, chasing whispers of other ruins, binding the stories of Iskara to those of Nahemara, of Deyvara, of Erythra, weaving them into one tapestry of memory. The crew, weary and broken, begged him to turn back, to return to shores where the sea was but sea, not memory and curse. But Caelith did not turn. He claimed that the cities were not separate but kin, bound together by some forgotten bond. Each a fragment of a world that once was whole. To find one was to find them all. To understand their fall was to learn the secret of the sea itself, and so they pressed on, until they came to waters red as blood. The sun itself seemed to falter above that place, its light dimmed, its warmth smothered. The ocean's surface gleamed as if stained, and below it rose the coral towers of Erythra, their crimson glow reaching like veins through the deep. No song of birds was heard, no sound of fish, only silence heavy as stone. The sailors whispered prayers, clutching amulets of bone, yet still the ship drifted closer, drawn as if by the current of a dream. Then the voices began. They came not from air or sea, but from within, whispers blooming in each man's mind, soft and coaxing, like the murmur of lost loved ones. The crew wept, reaching out with trembling hands toward the red waters, though nothing touched them. Some staggered to the rails, their eyes blank, their lips repeating words they could not understand. One by one they leapt into the sea, the waters closed around them, and as they vanished, crimson tendrils of coral wrapped their limbs, pulling them down into the labyrinth of Erythra. Their screams were brief, swallowed by the silence, and soon their voices joined the whispering chorus. Caelith alone stood firm. His face was pale, his fists clenched, but he did not yield. He stared into the crimson depths and cried out, his voice breaking, "Show me." The waters shuddered. The coral glowed brighter, and from the abyss rose a figure wrought of living reef, its eyes hollow yet burning, its form vast and terrible. It reached toward him, its hand a lattice of crimson thorns, and in that moment Caelith saw all, the birth of Erythra from the blood of its people, the city's hunger for offerings, its covenant with the sea that bound it forever in exchange for power. He fell upon the deck, gasping, his mind scorched with visions. When he rose again, he was alone. The Deyvara floated in silence, its crew vanished, its sails torn. Only Caelith remained, his eyes glowing faintly with a light not his own. For days he drifted, until the current bore him to another place, where the waters were calm, clear as glass. And there he saw Deyvara, the city of mirrors. Its walls gleamed with unearthly sheen, reflecting not the ship nor the sea, but countless visions of himself, some noble, some wretched, some monstrous beyond bearing. Each reflection moved of its own accord, their eyes fixed upon him with cruel mockery. One reflection reached from the wall, its hand breaking through the surface as though through water, and seized his wrist. Its voice was his own, yet twisted, "You are already ours." Caelith tore free, stumbling back, but the laughter of his reflections followed him, echoing across the calm waters. He fled that place, but he knew he carried its shadow within him. His eyes, once bright, were now mirrors themselves, and when he gazed upon the sea, he saw not water but endless cities, rising and falling, forever bound to memory. Thus was Caelith's fate, to wander until the sea claimed him. His name was lost, but his story lived on, told in whispers among sailors who swore they saw a black-sailed vessel adrift beneath the moon. Its lone captain staring into the depths with mirrored eyes, his lips moving with the songs of the drowned, and still the sea waits, patient, eternal, guarding her children of stone and coral, flame and glass. For she does not forget, and she does not forgive. Ages passed, and the drowned kingdoms sank deeper into the marrow of legend. Yet the sea was never silent. Fishermen swore that their nets tangled with chains wrought of silver, far older than their grandfathers' grandfathers. Pearl divers rose screaming from the depths, their hands clutching fragments of stone too finely carved for nature's hand, their minds unmoored by visions they could not name. Storms gathered where no storm should be, lightning striking the same point upon the sea again and again, as though some ancient beacon pulsed beneath. From distant shores came pilgrims who sought not fish nor trade but communion. They gathered at cliffs and rocky promontories, watching the horizon as though waiting for the sea to rise and return what it had taken. Their chants were wordless, their offerings of oil and bone cast upon the waves. They claimed the ocean was a tomb not of death but of waiting life, and that one day, when the land had grown too arrogant, the cities would rise again to reclaim what was theirs. It was in this age of half faith, half fear that a young woman named Lirael came to the sea. She was the daughter of a mason, raised among stones carved for temples and palaces, yet her heart was not bound to the land. From her earliest days she heard the voice of water, whispers in the rain, lullabies in the river, promises in the ocean's breath. When others heard only waves, she heard syllables older than words, and when she dreamed of stairways that spiraled down into lightless depths. The people of her village feared her, though they never said so aloud. They claimed she was touched, perhaps blessed, perhaps cursed, for whenever she walked along the shore, the tide rose higher, as though reaching for her feet. The gulls circled her head like guardians, and the fish gathered near her shadow. Mothers pulled their children away when she passed, yet none dared raise voice against her, for in her eyes shimmered the calm, endless weight of the sea itself. One night, beneath a moon veiled in storm cloud, Lirael stood upon the shore, her hair whipped by salt wind, her bare feet pressed into the wet sand. She felt the ground tremble beneath her as though a vast heartbeat pulsed from below. The sea hissed and retreated, bearing black rocks slick with weed. And in that fleeting moment she saw what no one else could see, a stairway descending from the beach into the abyss, its steps wide as houses, its edges glowing faintly as though lit by buried stars. Without hesitation, she walked, the water closed above her, yet she did not drown. Her breath flowed as though she inhaled the ocean itself, and the pressure of the deep bent around her like a cloak, never crushing, only guiding. She descended for hours, perhaps days, though time had no hold there. Around her, shadows moved, vast shapes that circled, their eyes glowing with curiosity rather than hunger. At last she reached the base of the stair. And before her lay a gate taller than mountains, wrought of stone blacker than night, carved with sigils that shifted when she gazed upon them. It stood ajar, as though waiting. Beyond it stretched an avenue lit with faint blue fire, and upon its stones lay no silt, no weed, no ruin. The city breathed as though it had never died. Lirael walked through Nahemara reborn. The towers glistened with pearl, the streets thrummed with hidden music, and though no figure moved within them, she felt countless eyes watching. Statues turned as she passed, fountains whispered her name, and the sea itself seemed to bow before her. She came at last to a hall vast as the horizon, its roof supported by columns carved in the shapes of whales and serpents. At its center stood a throne wrought of coral and bone, empty, yet heavy with unseen presence. As she approached, the waters stirred, and from the throne rose a figure of light and shadow, its form neither man nor woman, its eyes fathomless, its voice was the sea itself, rolling and infinite. You have come. Lirael bowed her head, though she did not know why. Words rose to her lips unbidden, I have always been here. The figure smiled, not with lips, but with the shifting of currents and the glimmer of light. Long have we waited. The land forgets, but the sea remembers. Cities drowned are not lost, they are dreaming. You are the tide between dream and waking. Lirael's heart trembled. Visions flooded her, Nahemara's glory, Iskara's fire, Deyvara's mirrors, Erythra's blood. She saw their birth, their triumph, their fall, each bound not by chance but by a covenant with the ocean itself. They had not perished, but descended into slumber, waiting for the one who could walk both land and sea. Who could call them forth when the time was ripe? The figure extended its hand. Coral bloomed from its palm, unfurling like a living crown. Take it, and remember. Lirael reached. When her fingers closed upon the coral, it pulsed with warmth, and in that instant, she felt the ocean surge into her veins. Her breath was no longer her own but the tide's, her heart beat the drum of waves upon cliffs. The drowned cities stirred, their voices rising in chorus, and the sea itself sang through her. When she awoke, she lay upon the shore, the storm broken, the dawn rising pale. In her hand still glimmered the crown of coral, and her eyes shone with the depths of the abyss. The villagers who found her fell to their knees, whispering prayers. For they knew no mortal had ever returned from such a journey. From that day forth, Lirael was no longer merely the mason's daughter. She became the voice of the deep, the tide-bearer, the one through whom the drowned kingdom spoke. Her words guided fishermen to safe waters, warned of storms before they formed, and soothed the grief of widows whose husbands had been taken by the sea. But in her dreams, the cities called still, their voices weaving into prophecy. They promised a day when the sea would rise, not in wrath, but in memory. The gates of the drowned kingdoms would open, and Nahemara, Iskara, Deyvara, and Erythra would walk again, not beneath waves, but upon the land, to reclaim the world that had forgotten them. And when that day came, it would be Lirael's voice that opened the way. Seasons turned, and the story of Lirael spread far beyond her village. Merchants carried it to distant harbors, where sailors drank deep and whispered of the girl who had walked into the sea and returned with its crown. Priests debated in hushed councils whether she was chosen of the gods or a herald of ruin. Kings sent envoys with gifts of gold, begging her to speak for them to the waves, to grant their fleets safe passage or to turn storms upon their enemies. But Lirael did not answer kings. Her voice was for the sea alone. She built no temple, yet pilgrims gathered where she dwelled, kneeling in silence upon the shore as she gazed into the horizon. She offered them no promises, no miracles, only silence broken by words that were not her own, fragments of prophecy, echoes of the drowned. The coral remembers. The fire waits. The mirror smiles. These phrases spread like fire, carried into every port and every market, until even those who had never seen the ocean trembled when the rains fell, yet Lirael was not untouched by the burden she bore. Each night her dreams grew heavier. The cities did not merely call to her, they pleaded. She saw Nahemara's towers crumbling in slow collapse, Iskara's flames dimming with hunger, Deyvara's mirrors cracking into splinters that bled shadows, and Erythra's coral blackening as though starved. They reached for her with arms of stone and reef, crying, "Wake us!" In waking hours she heard them still. When the tide lapped her feet she felt it not as water but as countless fingers, pulling her gently seaward. When the wind whispered across the cliffs, it spoke in syllables of ancient grief. Her own people feared her more with each passing day, for her eyes no longer reflected the sky but the deep, glowing faintly even in darkness. Children fled from her gaze, and even the gulls no longer circled her head but cried in shrill mourning when she passed. At last she could bear it no more. One evening, as the sun sank red and heavy, she rose and walked down to the shore, the crown of coral upon her brow. The pilgrims who waited there followed, murmuring prayers, though none dared touch her. She stepped into the waves, her voice steady as she spoke, "If the sea calls, I will answer." The water closed above her, and she did not rise again. In the nights that followed, strange wonders stirred. Sailors spoke of lights beneath the waves, moving not as fish but as lanterns carried down avenues unseen. Whole fleets awoke to find themselves surrounded by pillars of stone rising from the deep, only to watch them sink again when the dawn broke. In certain places, the tides no longer followed the moon, but rose and fell in rhythms like breath, as though the sea itself lived and waited. And then came the storm unlike any before. It rose without warning, a wall of cloud and lightning that swept across oceans, tearing ships from their courses and hurling them into unknown waters. But when the storm passed, mariners swore they had seen it, cities walking beneath the waves, their towers moving as though alive, their gates opening and closing with the tide. They told of figures striding within, tall, radiant, their faces hidden, their eyes bright as stars. Among these stories, one ship's tale stood above all others. The Deyvara returned. Long thought lost with its cursed captain, it drifted into harbor under clear sky, its sails torn, its timbers barnacled, yet afloat. Upon its deck stood no crew, no Caelith, only a single figure robed in seaweed and coral, her eyes glowing with the abyss. It was Lirael, her presence silenced the harbor. She did not speak, but raised her hand, and the sea stirred in answer, lapping high against the quays as though in greeting. Then she turned her gaze inland, to the mountains and valleys beyond, and for a moment the ground itself trembled. She spoke only once before vanishing again into the sea. The kingdoms are not gone. They are waiting. With those words, she walked back into the water, and the Deyvara, as though bound to her, followed, its hull sliding beneath the waves until only ripples remained. Afterward, the world was never the same. Some worshipped her as the herald of the deep, others cursed her as doom incarnate. Temples rose upon coastlines where once there had been only fishing villages, their altars carved in the likeness of coral crowns. Sailors refused to cast off without offerings to the drowned. Even inland, in kingdoms far from salt air, dreams came to the restless, visions of spires glowing beneath dark water, of voices calling through mirrors, of fire burning beneath the sea, and in the silence between storms, the ocean herself seemed to whisper with growing strength. The drowned cities stirred, and those who listened closely swore they could hear the sound of stone shifting in the depths. As though walls long buried were rising, as though gates long closed were creaking open, the sea does not forget. The sea waits. And perhaps, through Lirael, the sea had begun to wake, years deepened into centuries, and the tale of Lirael grew into myth, yet the sea did not rest. Again and again, her voice returned through storms, through visions, through the trembling of the tides. Mariners whispered that she had become more than mortal, that she now walked among the drowned kingdoms as their queen, her coral crown gleaming in the endless dark. Her presence was felt not only upon the waters but within the dreams of men, guiding, warning, haunting. It was in that age of shifting faith that the kingdoms of land rose high in arrogance. Kings built fortresses upon cliffs as though to defy the sea itself, raising banners that declared dominion over wind and wave. Merchants carved trade routes across oceans with fleets vast enough to blot the horizon, believing the waters to be mere highways of coin. Priests of new gods mocked the whispers of Nahemara and Iskara, calling them fables for the weak-minded, yet the ocean is patient, and patience is the weapon of eternity. One such kingdom was the Rem, proud and gilded, its throne halls paved with ivory, its banners bright with gold. Its ships plundered every coast, returning with jewels, with spices, with slaves. Its king, Althamar, declared himself master of shores, claiming no tide could resist his fleets. He ordered his masons to carve the cliffs with his face, gazing in defiance at the horizon, but on the eve of the harvest, when the moon rose blood-red, a great tremor shivered through the sea. The waves recoiled, dragging back from the coast until the ocean bed lay bare, fish flapping upon dry sand. The people of the Rem cried in awe, some kneeling, others fleeing. The king, drunk with pride, declared it a gift. A bowing of the sea before his crown. He led his court to the edge of the exposed abyss, where black stones and shattered ruins gleamed in the moonlight. There, before all, the sea rose again. It did not return as a wave, but as a wall, towering higher than palaces, its face lit with pale fire, its voice a thunder that split the earth. From within it gleamed towers of crystal, arches of pearl, faces tall and nameless, eyes glowing with hunger long denied. The drowned cities had stirred, and their voices spoke as one, we do not bow. We return. The wave fell, but whether in reverence or in defiance, all eyes turned toward the sea, for none could deny its voice now. In the generations that followed, children were born with strange marks upon their skin, patterns like coral, spirals like shells, eyes that shimmered faintly in darkness. Some of these children heard the sea as Lirael once had, speaking to them in dreams, drawing them down to the water's edge. Villages whispered that they were the chosen of the deep, harbingers of the return. Others, fearing their power, cast them out, binding their feet in chains so they could not walk to the shore. Yet even bound, their dreams carried them far, and in sleep their voices joined the chorus beneath the waves. One such child was Evren, born with hair pale as foam and skin marked with veins of faint blue. From infancy she hummed songs no one had taught her, melodies that made the tide swell and the gulls circle low. Her people feared her, yet when storms threatened, it was her voice that calmed the winds. When sickness spread, it was her touch that brought healing. Some knelt before her, others spat upon the ground where she walked, but none could deny she was bound to the ocean's will. On her 12th year, as she slept, the sea came for her. A wave rose from the horizon, taller than towers, yet it broke not upon the shore. Instead it reached, curling like a hand, and from it stepped a figure crowned in coral, her eyes glowing with the deep. It was Lirael. She stood in silence, her gaze upon Evren, and all who witnessed it fell prostrate, trembling. The girl awoke, her eyes wide, and she walked unafraid into the tide. Lirael took her hand, and together they vanished beneath the water, leaving only silence behind. The people mourned, but in the years that followed, Evren returned in visions. Sailors saw her walking the decks of ships lost at sea, guiding them toward ruins of light. Fishermen swore she stood upon the waves, pointing them to rich harvests. And always, her voice carried the same message as Lirael's before her: the kingdoms are not gone. They are waiting. The drowned cities had not perished. They dreamed still, their patience long, their voices growing stronger with each soul who joined their song. Nahemara's luminous streets, Iskara's fire-forged spires, Deyvara's endless mirrors, Erythra's crimson reefs, all stirred in unison, their echoes weaving into a hymn that shook the bones of the earth. And though the world still called them legend, the sea knew better. The sea remembered, the sea waits. The world of men tried to forget, yet forgetting is a frail craft. The sea's voice does not fade, it only deepens. Traders who sailed across the mid-ocean swore that some nights the waters glowed as if lit from below, casting the shadows of vast towers across the hulls of their ships. Fishermen hauled in nets heavy not with fish but with broken ornaments of gold, their engravings too intricate for any living hand. Divers were lost, their air rope pulled gently, not in struggle but as though guided downward into unseen streets. Inland kingdoms scoffed at these tales, yet even they were not spared. Dreams came to their courts, dreams of mirrors that cracked with laughter, of fire burning beneath black waves, of voices calling through coral mouths. Kings awoke in terror, their throats raw from crying names they had never heard. Whole villages abandoned rivers and lakes, claiming they had seen cities stirring beneath the still water, waiting. In that age of growing dread, there came a man named Thalon. He was neither king nor priest, but a wanderer, a scribe who filled endless scrolls with the songs and myths of forgotten places. He sought not coin nor crown but truth, and his heart was bound to silence more than to company. From his youth he had felt the call of water, though he fought it with ink and parchment, as though words could guard him from what lay beneath, but words are frail against eternity. One night, in a harbor town where sailors drank away fear, Thalen heard a tale whispered by a half-mad survivor. The man's eyes were pale as salt, his voice broken, but the words he spoke chilled Thalen's marrow. He told of a voyage to the far reaches, where the sea fell away into a hollow vast as the sky. There, he swore, lay all the cities as one, Nahemara gleaming, Iskara burning, Deyvara laughing, Erythra bleeding. They circled a void, waiting, bound by a secret deeper than memory. The man wept as he finished, crying, "They will rise together. Not one, but all." Thalen could not sleep after hearing this. He bought the man's cracked compass, though its needle spun madly, never pointing north. He followed its path across oceans where no star guided, through storms that raged without wind, into waters so still that his ship seemed suspended between sky and abyss. His crew dwindled, some deserting at the first strange shore, others vanishing in nights heavy with whispers. At last, Thalen sailed alone, and there he found it, the hollow sea. The waters dropped away like a cliff, plunging into darkness endless. Around its rim stretched ruins vast beyond comprehension. Cities fused by time, their stones woven with coral, their towers stitched together by shadow and fire. The air trembled with their voices, not whispers now, but chants, rising like the roar of waves upon cliffs. Thalen fell to his knees, his heart thunderous, and he wept not in fear but in awe. For he knew, at last, the truth: the drowned cities were not remnants, but guardians, their silence awaiting, their ruins a veil. They circled the hollow like sentinels, keeping something older still imprisoned in the abyss. As he gazed into the void, he saw it stir. Something vast and unseen shifted in the darkness, its presence so immense that the sea itself recoiled. Its breath was the tide. Its heart beat the tremors of the deep. And in his mind, Thalen heard words no tongue had ever shaped: "When the cities wake, so shall I." He fled then, abandoning his ship to the current, clutching only his scrolls. He returned to no harbor, for no harbor welcomed him. His hair turned white, his eyes clouded, but his voice carried the hymn of the drowned. He walked the coastlines, proclaiming what he had seen. Some mocked him, some stoned him, but others listened, and they too began to dream of the hollow sea. His scrolls, filled with words that burned and shifted, were hidden when he died. Yet fragments endured, carried from mouth to mouth, reshaped in each retelling. And though kingdoms fell and new ones rose, the whisper remained: the drowned cities wait not only for memory, but for the unlocking of that which stirs below. In the centuries that followed, storms grew stranger. Waves rolled against the grain of wind. Stars above the sea twisted into shapes unmarked by any map. Ships vanished, not in wreckage, but as though swallowed whole. And always, survivors spoke of cities half-glimpsed, of lights walking beneath the waves, of voices singing in chorus. Some claimed the drowned sought not return but release. Others said they guarded mankind from what slept below. Priests quarreled, kings waged war over fragments of prophecy, and across every coast, the people waited with fear in their marrow. And in the deep, the cities stirred. Nahemara's luminous stones began to glow brighter, Iskara's flames flared with sudden hunger. Deyvara's mirrors rippled as though with breath, and Erythra's coral bled anew into the tides. They no longer slumbered as before, they listened, and they dreamed of rising, and always, through storm and silence, the ocean's hymn endured, the sea does not forget. The sea waits. The centuries turned, and men learned to fear their own memory. For the more they tried to bury the tales of Nahemara, Iskara, Deyvara, and Erythra, the more the sea reminded them. Ruins rose from the depths after storms, visible for a night before sinking again. Fishermen cast their nets into shallow bays and drew up fragments of statues, faces too noble to belong to any mortal of this age. And when thunder rolled across the horizon, some swore they could hear voices within it, calling names no tongue had spoken for thousands of years. In time, a new empire rose upon the western shores, its crowned city called Lirael. Its walls of granite were thought eternal, its towers lined with gold, and its fleets vast enough to choke the harbors of lesser kings. Its priests forbade the worship of the drowned, declaring that all such tales were lies meant to weaken men's hearts. They built temples to the sky and the sun, mocking the sea as a realm of chaos, unworthy of reverence, but even Lirael could not still the whispers. Children born within its walls began to dream of stairways beneath the waves. Sailors returned from voyages with their skin patterned like coral, their eyes reflecting the abyss. The priests burned them as heretics, yet each season more were born, until even the royal court could not deny the change. The emperor of Lirael, proud and cruel, declared the ocean his enemy. He commanded his magisters to forge weapons of thunder, cannons greater than any seen before, and he sent his fleets to scour the coasts, burning villages that still knelt to the tide. He raised his voice against the sea itself, shouting from the high cliffs, "I am master of the world. No drowned stone shall rise against me." That very night, the sea answered. The waters withdrew, dragging away from the harbor until the seabed lay bare. From the muck rose avenues of black stone, their surfaces wet and gleaming, carved with runes that glowed like embers. At their center stood a gate taller than the emperor's tallest tower, half buried but unmistakable, its arch crowned with fire that burned unharmed in water's grasp. The people of Lirael screamed, some in awe, others in terror. But the emperor strode forth with his guards, declaring that the sea had revealed its treasure to him. He ordered his men to march into the gate, to claim whatever lay within. They obeyed, though their faces were pale, their steps unsteady, when the last man crossed the threshold. The fire flared brighter, and the gate closed. The emperor laughed, declaring his triumph. But the laughter died as the sea rushed back, a wall of water crashing upon the harbor. The ships shattered, the quays splintered, and the great gate vanished once more beneath the tide. Of his men, not one returned, and in the nights that followed, the people of Lirael swore they saw them still, walking upon the seabed, their eyes glowing like embers, their mouths opening in silent curses. The drowned of Iskara had gained new voices, and the empire's fear grew until no priest could silence it. Across the world, the omens multiplied. In the north, a lake frozen for ages cracked open, revealing steps descending into fire-lit chambers. Hunters who ventured near returned with their skins scorched though no flame had touched them, muttering in voices that were not their own. In the south, the desert swallowed itself in a storm of red sand, and when it cleared, a vast basin had opened, filled not with dust but with water. Beneath its surface shimmered towers of coral, bleeding color into the waves, and in the east, where the cliffs of glass met the sea, a mirror of impossible size rose from the deep, its surface rippling like water, though it was harder than stone. Those who gazed into it saw not themselves but cities alive. Spires gleaming, avenues thronged with figures tall and radiant. When the tide fell, the mirror sank again, leaving only the silence of waves. The drowned kingdoms were no longer content with dreams. They reached upward now, piece by piece, reminding the world of their presence. Among those who heard their call was a boy named Kaelir, son of a fisherman from a forgotten isle. From birth he bore a mark across his chest, a spiral like the curl of a wave. His eyes shimmered like the sea at dusk, neither wholly blue nor green but shifting with the light. He spoke little, yet when he sang, the tide rose and fell in rhythm with his voice. His people feared him, but they also guarded him. For they knew he was bound to the ocean's will. Elders whispered that he was the answer to Lirael's prophecy, the one who would open the way. Kaelir himself knew nothing but longing. Each night he dreamt of voices calling his name, of stairways and gates, of cities waiting with outstretched hands. On the eve of his 16th year, a storm unlike any before struck the isle. The waves rose higher than mountains, lightning split the sky in endless fire, and the sea roared with voices innumerable. The people fled inland, but Kaelir walked into the tide, drawn as though by unseen arms. The water closed above him, and the storm broke. When dawn returned, the isle was gone. Where once it had stood, the sea stretched unbroken, calm as glass. But sailors who passed in later years told of a youth who walked upon the waves, his voice carrying like thunder, his eyes burning with the abyss. Some swore he commanded the tides themselves, others that he led fleets of drowned ships, their sails woven of seaweed, their crews silent and glowing. Always his name was spoken in whispers, for none knew whether he was savior or doom. The drowned kingdoms stir. Their patience thins, Nahemara glows, Iskara burns, Deyvara laughs, Erythra bleeds. The hollow sea trembles with the weight of their voices. And in every corner of the world, men and women dream of stairways leading down, of gates opening wide, of cities that do not forgive. The sea does not forget, the sea waits, and perhaps soon, she will rise. The omens no longer whispered. They roared, across coasts and harbors, the sea grew restless. Waves broke in patterns unnatural, spiraling like runes written upon the surface. The moon itself seemed altered, casting not pale light but a sheen that shimmered with hues of deep green and violet, as though the heavens mirrored the drowned cities below. Mariners feared to sail, yet even when ships stayed ashore, voices came to them in sleep, commanding, urging, summoning. Villages emptied as people walked into the tide without cry or struggle, their faces serene, their steps measured. Whole fleets vanished not in storm but in silence, their sails seen drifting days later, crewless, gliding toward horizons unknown. Children born in that age came into the world humming songs none had taught them, their small hands clenching as if around invisible relics, their first words names of cities no living tongue should remember. The priests of new gods trembled, their temples empty as congregations gathered instead upon the shores. Some burned their altars, others drowned themselves in penance, yet all feared the truth. The drowned were waking, it was then that the hollow sea stirred. For countless ages it had brooded, a circle of darkness ringed by the dreaming kingdoms. But one night, as the stars bent strangely above, the waters within the hollow churned. Columns of light rose from its depths, pillars vast enough to pierce the clouds. Their glow reached the shores of distant lands, and even those who had never seen the sea awoke in terror, crying of towers rising from water. The drowned cities answered. Nahemara's luminous spires flared brighter than moonlight, Iskara's obsidian towers bled fire into the deep, Deyvara's mirrors rippled with laughter, and Erythra's coral reefs spread like veins, glowing red across the currents. Their voices, once separate, now joined in a single hymn. A sound so vast that cliffs crumbled, mountains shuddered, and the hearts of men faltered in their chests. We are not gone. We are not lost. We are waiting. Amid this rising chorus, Kaelir returned. No longer a boy, he strode upon the waters, his coral-marked chest aglow, his eyes twin abysses that shimmered with the light of 1,000 ruins. He bore no crown, yet the sea crowned him with foam, he bore no scepter, yet the tides bent to his hand. From distant lands ships gathered, not with sails of war but in awe, their crews kneeling upon decks as his shadow passed. He did not speak often, but when he did, the waves obeyed. Storms broke at his whisper. Calm spread at his sigh. His words carried the weight of prophecy, and the drowned cities echoed them as their own. One night, beneath a sky shorn of stars, he stood above the hollow sea. Behind him stretched a fleet unlike any seen before, some ships carved by mortal hands, others of coral and pearl, rising from the deep with crews who glowed like embers, their eyes fixed in silence upon him. Mortals and drowned together, bound by one will, Kaelir raised his hands, and the hollow sea opened, the waters split like curtains, descending into shadow vast as eternity. From its depths rose an archway older than the world, a gate of stone blacker than night, inscribed with runes that writhed like serpents. Its surface glowed with the light of all 4 cities, woven into one. And beyond the gate, something stirred. The fleet trembled, men crying in awe, some weeping, some laughing in madness. From the depths of the gate rose a sound not of earth nor sky, a voice too immense for thought. It spoke not in language but in memory, pressing into every heart the weight of its truth. When the cities wake, so shall I. The drowned kingdoms trembled in unison, their spires flaring, their voices rising into one final hymn. Kaelir's arms shook, his voice breaking as he cried out, not in fear, but in command, rise, if you must. But remember, the sea itself roared, drowning his words, and the gate flared brighter than the sun. On that night the world changed. Some said the drowned cities rose. their towers breaking the surface to stand once more in the daylight. Others swore they vanished altogether, sinking into the abyss forever, taking Kaelir and his fleet with them. There are those who claim that the hollow sea itself collapsed, becoming an endless whirlpool that swallows all who dare approach. But none deny the truth. From that day, the sea has not been the same. Its tides move with a rhythm unfamiliar, its storms roar with voices, and its silence is heavier than stone, and in the dreams of men and women everywhere, the drowned cities linger still. They walk their glowing avenues, their burning spires, their laughing mirrors, their bleeding reefs. They wait, eternal, patient, for the sea does not forget, the sea waits, and one day, when the world is unprepared, the sea will rise again.